2009, I was 14, about 14, getting ready to turn 15, and this was during a time in my life where I was getting immensely into Star Wars. So I was watching those movies daily during the summer in between ninth and 10th grade, I believe. So I'm watching those movies like once a day, every single day, because I enjoyed them so much. And then I started getting interested in like what was going on in the background, with the score from John Williams and whatnot. And at the time, I had known nothing about anything about like writing music. I'd been in band for a while, but like I didn't know how to like make my own music. So don't hate me, Finale. I pirated a copy of Finale 2009 at the time, and I started, like shimmying around making my own music per se. At least at the time, it was more plagiarizing John Williams melodies and doing my own little thing. So that was a time. Yeah, looking back on it, I guess that was like interesting because like it taught me like what the melodies were and like what their note values were and like where things go where they should. And this is before I knew anything about like orchestration and whatnot. So I think to myself as I'm doing this, I'm like, this is something I could do. So I talked to my dad, thinking how cool would this be if I did this? Because he himself is a bass guitar player, so he is largely self-taught. So I'd always like been hearing him practice like all over the course of when I lived with him. So we go ahead. He says, it'd be a cool idea, but you can't be plagiarizing this stuff. You have to write your own stuff. And I was like, oh, I guess that's a start. So I spent another like year, like just messing with Williams melodies and just doing things that I think would sound cool if I did them. And then I finally had written my first original piece. I say original because it was forever ago, and I look back on it now, and the piece was bad, but it again, it's like my very first one. So, and this is also largely without any training still at this point. So I wrote my very first piece, and I'm like, okay, this is something I could do. This is something I could do. So I talked to my band director. I asked him if he can give me like tips about how to like use instruments in different ways. He goes ahead and like gives me some tips and whatnot, and like uses the music we were playing at the time as like, here's things that they can do. And he said, also sign up for a music theory class. I was like, oh, what's that? What's music theory? So my senior year of high school, signed up for his music theory class and got a little preview up till we did everything from the basics, started running species when we got to that point. And that kind of helped like shape even more basic like composition stuff that I learned. I was like, okay, that's cool. So all throughout high school at this point too, I started watching more movies with like more like soundtrack qualities that I really liked, like John Williams-esque. I got huge into Lord of the Rings, and I adore everything Howard Shore writes. And then getting into Hans Zimmer, Alan Silvestri, composers like that. And then in my head, I'm like, okay, so film music is used to portray and elevate the story. So what can I do to like get those things going for things that are in my head? And I decided also that day too, is like, I'm going to be a music major when I go to college. So my school didn't have a composition program, so I was not able to take composition lessons. So at first I started as a music education major, but then I changed my mind, dropped the education major because I liked writing more than I did playing. So I kept writing all throughout college. I got two things performed in college, actually. I had a string quartet played that I really wish I had gotten recorded, but at the time I was not thinking about it, so I regret that choice. There was an orchestral piece I got played. Part of that got recorded, actually, and I still have that somewhere. And I played my own piece for my senior recital. Fast forward now to I leave college. I'm kind of like floating in the market right now, doing my own thing. And around 2018, a few years ago, I had come across sample libraries because up to this point, I had never heard of sample libraries in my life. But there were a few forums I was a part of. Wow, forums. There were a few forums I was a part of where they would show off their pieces. And I was wondering why theirs sounded different than mine did, because I would use my Finale files to show off my stuff. And then I came across a bunch of people showing their pieces that sounded just better. Because that was around the time, Note Performer was becoming hot and other VSTs were being used and whatnot. So I'm looking into it and I'm trying to figure it out. And then I come across this YouTube channel where this guy makes covers of video game music. And that was the day I had found out about Spitfire. And I was like, oh, so there are actual libraries out there where people can use almost semi-real instruments. And that raised questions in my head. It's like, okay. So I started exploring sample libraries, and I have dumped a lot of money into sample libraries. And I started out with the first, I think this was around the time they've just started doing it with the East-West Composer Cloud. That was my very first batch of sample libraries. And that is what I messed with for the longest time about a couple of years ago. I would write my scores in Finale and then put them into Cubase, at least at the time it was Cubase Elements, put it in there, then put it all together, and then was like, wow, that sounds really cool. Then, again, I do way too much deep diving into YouTube. I find more sample libraries. And that's where I come across my flagship libraries I love to use, the Cinematic Studio series. They're so good. So those are the ones I currently use. I use the Brass, the Strings, and the Woodwinds one. The Woodwinds one, when that came out, I insta-bought it, and I had just gotten paid that day, and I was like, yep, that's a purchase.
I would love to dive into that a bit more, and yeah, thank you for sharing that. So with music libraries now, it seems like there's a handful that you use. I guess maybe going a step back, these YouTube channels, these other like online resources that you came across, curious like what those YouTube channels were. Like you had mentioned that there was a composer that does video game covers.
Okay, so I don't know their name specifically, but the YouTube channel is Video Game Orchestral Score.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they do tons and tons of different like covers from various video games, and it is top-notch quality. I really enjoy their work.
Wow.
Very
cool.
Amazing arrangements. 8-Bit Music Theory, I follow them too. They're great. So that's how I kind of like get into the deep diving of music theory. I believe the other channel I follow is called Orchestration Online. It's another one learning about how I learned most of my orchestration stuff on the fly. My band director, Dr. Marty Marks, who is now a teacher in Oklahoma. That man was very, very, very intelligent with like his arranging and writing. I think he got either his master's or his doctorate in woodwind arranging. I think it was one of those. Yeah, very, very intelligent man. Very, very amazing teacher. And I honestly do miss him a lot. He's great. He teaches now in Oklahoma, like I mentioned earlier, no longer in Michigan.
That's awesome. And so now, kind of getting up to current day, what are you working on now that's exciting? Or do you have any projects kind of like lined up that you're looking to share?
So at the moment, I'm not doing any projects for anybody except just for myself. In my head, I came across an idea for writing like a mock video game album that I'm doing currently.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty much like your classic fantasy RPG, except I'm trying to impose like some JRPG elements in there too. So I've been learning about like the theory and the orchestrations behind that. I didn't realize just how many like extended harmonies that like those games use, and it's actually kind of fun like putting them into play, and it sounds really cool.
Nice. That's awesome. And I would love to pick your brain and understand your process for how you go about composing a piece of music, whether it's for this upcoming album you're working on or just stuff that you've done in the past. Do you have like a common sort of like or a consistent way of kind of putting that music together?
Yeah. So at first, what I would do is back in the day, I would just open Finale and just whatever came to mind, go for it. I can't do that no more. However, now sometimes I'll get a little bug in my head, as a friend of mine would say. So you get a little bug in your head. And what you do is you take that bug and write it down. Now what I'll do is I'll open Finale, only do a piano reduction with 2 pianos. I'll put in like the melody, see how it sounds, if that's exactly what I'm hearing in my head, and then I'll try to like formulate things around it and like maybe move the melody in a different place if I don't want it right at the beginning.
Okay.
It's been pretty standard what I've been doing for the past few years, and honestly, it works. I don't know why I never started doing like piano reductions first and then expanding the orchestration. It's just so much easier.
This is probably an ignorant question, but what is a piano reduction?
So I write the whole score on 2 pianos only before I put it into full orchestra.
That's cool. What do you think makes you stand out as a composer? What about your music is kind of unique and I guess native to you or your sound?
So I'm going to give you 2 answers for this one. A joke answer and a real answer. My joke answer is whenever I am writing, I will always, at least 3 times in a piece, go to the lowest register of basses. Always. 'Cause I love the lowest ends of the basses. Now, my real answer, of course, is I like to incorporate a lot of like Mahler-esque orchestration into my music, meaning like not like the full nonsense of what he would do, but like the way he uses colors. I really love the way Mahler used colors in his music. And I will try to like do some of those like doublings that he did in my music. I like to be more on the early 20th century of like orchestration and writing. That's the sound that I like personally.
On that note, what are you most proud of as an orchestrator and composer so far in your career? Is there a particular piece of music that you've written that you're like, hey, this is my best work, or top two pieces of music? Curious if you have something you're most proud of.
I do actually, and it's a piece I wrote a few years ago. It's called the Winter Wonderland March. I wrote that during a snowstorm in Michigan, and it was just something about like, because the storm had happened like somewhere in the middle of the night, and I happened to be awake, and I looked out my window at my dad's house, and I just saw just the gentle snowflakes before this whole storm had started, and it instantly put the bug in my head for the beginning of that piece. And I sat down for like a couple of weeks and I wrote the whole thing out, and it's still my favorite piece I've written to this day. It is on my featured works list on my SoundCloud. It should be on the SoundCloud playlist.
Awesome. As a composer and orchestrator, what are sort of your career goals going forward at this point?
So I have a few, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course.
So one of the big ones, obviously, is score for. I want just a score for just one feature film, just only one. I would love to be able to do that. Another is I would actually want to become a full-time orchestrator, because I would argue that my skills in orchestration are better than in my actual composing, especially because I just find like to pick at my own brain as like what would sound cool where. I like being able to do that. And then my other one is me and my friend, we made one together, is that we would love to meet each other and both get nominated for something at the Video Game Awards.
Awesome. Do you have a particular like video game that is like your favorite, or video game score, I should say?
Oh yeah. So it's a Super Nintendo game called Chrono Trigger. It is my favorite game of all time. No pun intended, because the game's about time travel, for those who don't know. The story is immaculate. I love the score. I replay that game like once every few years. It's just I have the soundtrack saved on my Spotify because that game had a profound impact on my life in terms of like what I like when it comes to gaming.
Awesome. Well, this has been super awesome chatting with you, Darnell. Before we sign off, is there anything else that you wanted to talk about that maybe I didn't ask you? Anything that you want to share with sort of the broader community, or anything to like, filmmakers for that matter, or video game producers who are looking to get custom music?
Yeah. Well, to anyone out there who is looking for a composer such as myself, who ends more on the classical side, I enjoy working with directors. This one guy I worked with, we did a project together. He did a silent mini film series called Unspeakable Acts, and I was in charge of writing the music for that. And him and I would communicate with each other, and we had like the same ideas on certain things, and it was great to kind of like click with him. And that project was fun. And writing jazz was hard, I learned that day too. It's not hard now, I know how to do it. But back that was my very first time. It took me 12 hours to write a jazz line for that video. And I was so mad at the end of it. I was like, oh God, what have I done? But no, that was great. I really hope to be able to like work on more things in the future and like expand my creative palette. So if anyone needs any orchestra music, I can do synthwave too. That's fun. And jazz and funk. I had to do that one once too. So if anyone needs any of that, my profile is on the website. Username dhamel123. My name's Darnell Hamilton, based out of San Antonio, Texas.
Darnell, thank you so much for chatting with me. It was a pleasure talking with you.
Yeah, thank you for like doing this opportunity and letting me be a part of this.
Yeah, of course. What are some of the ways in which like you're trying to find, consistent paying scoring gigs?
I'm in a point in my life where I'm kind of Charles Ivesing it. So for those who don't know, Charles Ives was a famous American composer, but that was not his main gig. he was an insurance salesman on the side. So writing music is actually my side thing I'm doing while I work IT at the moment,
Mhm.
because I would love to be able to do music full time in the future. That would be
Mhm.
great. So right now, I mainly reach out to people on various Facebook groups I'm a part of, where they say they're looking for a composer, and then I'll reach out to them. Sometimes you don't get a reply, and that's okay. There's like I'm messaging along with like maybe 150 other people, and that's okay. It happens. There are a lot of composers out there who are also looking to write some music as well. It's just like kind of just like throwing some stones out there, being like, "Hey, pick B," and sometimes it lands and sometimes it doesn't. But if it
Yeah.
doesn't, okay, move on. Next one. I'll get the next one. You keep telling yourself, I'll get the next one, and eventually you'll get it.
Yeah. So it's been primarily these film composer and filmmaker Facebook groups where you're trying to kind of find those opportunities
hmm
primarily.
So that's why when I found this resource for your website, I was like, this could be something really cool.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like I'm waiting, and they reach out to me.
Right. Right. Yeah. Well, that's the goal. That's the point. I mean, I myself am a musician. I'm a guitar player and a bit of a composer too. And yeah, so I'm with you there.
Yeah, it's like I say, because I'm competing with like 200 other people who are also commenting on it, and because the timeline never refreshes by chronological order, you don't see it firsthand. Sometimes I'll get to a post about an opportunity like 2 days later. Like there was one that I saw where they were looking for music to give to a high school orchestra in California, and I missed that post by 3 days because I also really don't really get on Facebook that much. So I'm kind of sad
Mhm.
about that one, because that would have been really cool. So there's that. And it's also me like not knowing too many other like resources to reaching out to like various filmmakers and whatnot to be able to like get those things like firsthand.
Mhm. Mhm.
So it's also kind of a little bit of a personal barrier, but I can overcome that if I put my mind to it.
Yeah, got it. And then is it kind of one of those things where as opportunities, say on Facebook and these groups pop up, you're like, oh, hey, that looks interesting. I'll do it. Is it sort of, I'm just curious the frequency in which you're kind of seeking other opportunities, like how much you're going on Facebook and putting yourself out there. Is it daily,
Mhm.
weekly, monthly?
Uh, I would say probably like bi-weekly.
Okay.
Every now and then I'll see something pop up. Like there was one earlier this morning that popped up that they're looking for like a sound I'm not used to doing, so I'll probably put in for that one still, just to be like, well, I can learn how to do it.
Hmm.
We
Yeah,
live and we learn.
right. Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much, Darnell. Have a great one. And yeah, we'll be in touch.
Thanks, you as well. Have a good rest of your day.
All right. Take care. Bye.